FM Talk 106.5, the Gulf Coast Weather Authority. The safety is off. There's a round in the chamber. This is Armed Alabama. Sponsored by McCoy Outdoor Company, Mobile's hometown full-line outdoor sporting products and gear store. An interactive talk show discussing self-defense, product reviews, shooting tips, safety, and more. Your calls, comments, and texts welcome at 343-0106. Now, here are your hosts, retired judge and certified NRA instructor Rusty Johnston and certified NRA law enforcement instructor Adam Strange.
They're gonna pry these guns right out of my hands when they come to take them away. I believe in the rights that my fathers gave me when he signed the Constitution that day. No misguided president or crooked politician with a greasy pocket be spared. When the hard-working man gets tired of your cry, it's gonna rain wrath, beware. Don't tread on me, I'm American free. You're not gonna take it away. I stand up and fight for my freedoms and rights. That's a price you'll have to pay. Don't tread on me, I'm American free. Red-blooded to the core. You ain't ever had a fight in your life like the fight that you're itching for.
Welcome to Armed Alabama. Glad you could join us tonight. Of course, this is our favorite show of the week here on Armed Alabama. So thank you for tuning in. This is your show about self-defense, firearm and ammo selection, home protection, concealed carry, training, proper range etiquette, Alabama law, Mississippi law, Florida law, and of course, federal law with myself and Judge Johnston. So glad you can join us. Give us a call here at the studio, 251-343-0106 if you have a comment or a question for us, or you can text to that same number a comment or a question, 251-343-0106. And be sure to follow us on our Facebook page. That's Armed Alabama Radio, FM Talk 106.5. Please like, save, and follow while you're there. Of course, we're simulcasting on our Facebook page right now. So if you want to go to our Facebook page, you can see us on a video. Of course, the judge has brought a few things for show and tell tonight. It'd be interesting.
We're also going to give away a couple of more of Paul Brewski's book about the last siege.
That's Mobile, a good book.
Mobile campaign. I've just got to get a couple of questions that aren't erroneous like these internet quizzes always give us.
So also check out our website, armedalabama.com, and we got a lot of information there. We have all of our previous shows going back to our first show, believe it or not, over 3 years ago, Judge. Can you believe that?
Yeah, exactly.
Fastest 3 years ever. And if you have a comment or a question that you may not necessarily want to provide us on the show here tonight, you can email us, adam@armedalabama.com or the judge at armedalabama.com. We'll be glad to hear from you.
And you've told them, but they can text that number.
Yes.
They don't have to use their name, and if they just have a quick question, and we'll try to answer it.
Also, you can ask us questions during the Facebook Live cast. So there's lots of people that join us there on Facebook Live and ask questions from there. So lots of opportunities to provide input to the show.
And I've got one of the questions here. You want to start off with a question? We can kind of get things going now?
Yes.
All right. Which of these ships fought in the first battle between ironclads, of course, which was in the Civil War? I'm going to name which one of these ships. Was it the Lusitania, the Titanic, the Pinafore, or the Monitor? So whoever can answer that question, you got to call in, though. You will win a copy of The Last Siege, the Mobile Campaign, Alabama 1865 by Mobile's own Paul Brewski, and we'll get that out to you. Which of these ships fought in the first battle between ironclads? Was it the Lusitania, the Titanic, the Pinafore, or the Monitor?
I actually know the answer to that question,
yeah.
and I built a model in high school.
I kind of grabbed it too because you used to be in the ship business.
Yeah,
so.
I love shipbuilding.
Right.
So, Judge, when we come on the air here, we always talk about the different topics that we cover here in the show, and one of those is proper range etiquette.
Yes.
Of course, you and I, we go to our own little ranges. We don't get a chance to really go to public ranges too much. And I had a chance.
We are perfectly adequate people.
Yes, for the most part.
Yeah.
But I actually had a chance to go to a public range, and I've just been training so much by myself that I actually didn't follow the rules a little bit. So even we can make mistakes, and it's up to us to be vigilant.
Well, yeah.
When we're at the range.
One way we make mistakes, I don't force people who are with me to wear safety glasses. I always wear them. And people they'll have their sunglasses on or whatever, and I just won't push the issue. But I represented actually a safety glasses company when I was a lawyer, and there was an explosion and somebody was blinded. But so I really got into them then, and they're very, very important, and you can get them at a pretty reasonable price, and you ought to wear them every time you're shooting.
Yeah, well, usually with public ranges, you have a range master that's running the range, and so you have to follow their directions, and been so used to training by myself that I kind of lost where I was at talking and visiting or whatever. So
why don't we see? Looks like we got Judy. She may, I suspect, she might have an answer for us. Judy, you're on the air. Do you know you want to chat, or you know the answer to the question?
Give me the question one more time.
Okay. Which of these ships fought in the first battle between ironclads? Was it the Lusitania, the Titanic, the Pinafore, or the Monitor?
It was the Monitor.
You got it. Oh, good for you. Good for you.
Monitor and the Merrimack.
Yeah.
My son's a Confederate veteran's daddy would just kill me if I didn't get that one right.
Yeah, that's when Lusitania, that was World War I, Titanic. Of course, that wasn't that tax day, 1912, April 15th, I think. But if you want to chat some more, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll hand you off to Phil, and he'll get your name and address, and we'll drop this in the mail to you.
No, nothing else to say. I loved you as a judge. Okay?
Thank you so much, Judy. I love you.
I've been in the courtroom as a paralegal before.
All right. Hang on.
All right.
Hold on.
Well,
she needs to call more often.
Yeah. That question didn't hang out around too long, did it?
No. I was saying that some of these quizzes are inaccurate. One I actually posted something about was, I may get wording a little bit wrong, but it says the southern states seceded over this issue that the Republican Party, was for in the 1860 election, something like that. And it said, immigration, blah, blah. And it says abolition of slavery. And their platform, which I pasted in 1860 and in 56, didn't say anything about abolition of slavery. It opposed the spread of slavery into the territories. There was no plank about abolishing slavery. And they're just boldly put in these quizzes like that. And that's just one of, I could name a dozen of them. But if you want to go on to the next question, you've got to answer that one properly.
Hey, Judge, was
Yes.
the Monitor the Confederate ship?
Merrimack / Virginia, what it was relabeled when it became but everybody still called it the Merrimack.
This is a very
Monitor
insignificant piece of information that I'm going to share, but when I was 5 or 6 years old, my dad was in the Navy, stationed at Norfolk, right outside the main gate.
About this time, probably.
Right outside the main gate was this little housing area, and it was all military people there, and it was Merrimack Park.
Oh, wow.
So
Interesting.
it had to have been named
like
after
I say,
the ship.
And I'll tell you one other interesting. Admiral Franklin Buchanan, who was actually the man who was first commandant or whatever of the Naval Academy, actually was the one who started it, from Maryland. But he was in charge of, believe, the Virginia / Merrimack in that fight. Later commanded the naval forces at the Battle of Mobile Bay, and lost his leg. And he said, they were going down with the ship. And after he lost his leg, everybody's bleeding. Well, okay, we can't steer it anymore. So let's try to take Chuck, and if we run too long, we'll hold him over. Hey, Chuck.
Good evening.
How are you?
I have a question about traveling with firearms in a motorhome.
Okay.
What are the laws with that whenever you're traveling across state lines that don't recognize the pistol permits for Alabama?
Yeah, there's something called the doctrine of peaceable travel, and basically it means if you carry it unloaded, separate from the ammunition, preferably in a locked box away from your reach, in the back where you're storing your luggage or your closet or whatever, you're fine. You don't need a pistol permit anywhere you go. Now, the only place I would be concerned is the 3 or 4, 5 states up around New York, New Jersey, those people.
We don't really travel up that far, but I know we went to Virginia. I know South Carolina.
Yeah, you're fine in Virginia, but you get up to I went to Washington, took the family a few years ago, and I just I felt like I needed my gun the whole way, but I still wouldn't take it because this was for the Heller case. I thought I don't want to wind up in Washington D.C. jail, so
right.
But yeah, that'll get you there if you as long as you have it separated from the ammunition, not loaded, and in a box away from you.
All right, that'll work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for calling.
Yes, sir.
I think it's time for a break. We'll be right back.
This program is a production of Armed Alabama, LLC. The comments and views of the hosts are those of Armed Alabama, LLC, for which it is solely responsible. The view and comments of the callers, guests, and texters do not necessarily represent the views of the sponsors or advertisers of Armed Alabama, LLC, or of Armed Alabama, LLC, Bigler Broadcasting, LLC, FM Talk 1065, or WABH. No comments from Judge Rusty Johnston should be taken as legal advice, but as educational information. Judge Johnston is not engaged in the practice of law and should not be sought out to answer legal questions off the air. Seek legal advice from a qualified attorney who knows the complete specifics of your legal matter.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
My name is Michael Weston. I used to be a spy until...
We got a burn notice on you. You're blacklisted.
When you're burned, you've got nothing. No cash, no credit, no job history. You're stuck in whatever city they decide to dump you in.
Miami.
Bottom line, until you figure out who burned you, you're not going anywhere. My name is Michael Weston. I used to be...
Love that show. Burn Notice.
Yes. Yeah.
It's easy to sit and binge watch that. Yeah.
My kids got me into it.
Hey, speaking of binge watch, I'm going to play the music now.
Okay.
We got the wires crossed
this is
a little.
Reason for this music.
We're on Easy Street, and it feels so sweet, 'cause the world is but a treat, and you're on Easy Street, and we're breaking out the good champagne. We're sitting pretty on the gravy train, and when we sing every sweet refrain repeats right here on Easy Street. It's our moment in the sun, and it's only just...
If anybody has watched or is a fan of The Walking Dead on AMC, you know about Negan and his baseball bat wrapped with barbed wire.
You're going to scare all the Facebook folks.
And what I did today, this is my little project. I made a Lucile here I made sure I had rusted barbed wire. Though.
Yeah, you don't want new barbed wire.
Yeah, you want to give lockjaw to somebody you hit. So that was actually a little scary. I had 2 pair of gloves on, one Kevlar.
Well, for the radio folks, that's a baseball bat.
It's a baseball bat wrapped from,
about halfway up.
Yeah, about halfway up with not real rusted, but fairly rusted barbed wire.
What gauge barbed wire is that? That looks really heavy.
Yeah, I tell you. It's something we put on a good while ago, I think.
That's not chicken wire for sure.
No, I think it's that, they call it gaucho. Is that, and of course, not razor wire. But if you notice it, it's really hardly rusted. But I'm sure it was galvanized originally.
You could do a lot of damage with that.
Oh, well, and I was telling Adam, the bat, when I first tried to put a staple, that you use on barbed wire, it just bounced off the bat. So I had to drill holes in to get the staple going. So anyway, Walking Dead, Negan, and that song goes with it, and he's a horrible person, and he beats people up with that baseball bat. I guess the least thing you have to worry about is lockjaw, but if he came at you with that bat, you would certainly have the right to use deadly force.
And you don't have to have a permit to carry it.
Don't have to have a permit, and I guess maybe it's intimidating.
I wouldn't try to carry it
if you had a rack in the back of your truck.
Just
people used to have axe handles. Well, Adam, there was a shooting at a school in Colorado today.
Yeah,
What's the facts on that?
That news is kind of breaking if you hadn't heard about it. Not too far from Littleton, Colorado, there was a shooting at a STEM school, which is science, technology, and engineering and math.
I thought you were going to say they made stem cells there.
No.
No, what the...
And there's still lots of information at this time that's just not been made available. But
was anyone killed?
I don't think so at this time. There was one student that still, I think, remains unconscious from the shooting, but there was 7 people that was injured. I do think 2 suspects were apprehended and maybe 1 more at large. So that's the information that I have right now.
And, I think what it shows, too, is... one child being shot is one too many, but the people that collect these statistics, they count school shootings as somebody Saturday in the school, football field that shoots a BB gun at somebody else. That's a school shooting. And I've seen all those numbers, and they do it. Your kids are safer at school than they are at your house statistically. They're more likely to be killed in your house, falling off a ladder, drowning, whatever, than they are to be hurt in the school.
Apparently, the law enforcement was charging into the building, and I think sheriff's deputies were making the rounds on the rounds.
There was lots
instead of standing around waiting for some.
There was lots of different departments and agencies that responded to that.
Otherwise, it could have been probably a whole lot worse.
To your point, Judge, you're absolutely right. As far as statistic-wise, your children are safer at schools.
It's kind of like statistically, lightning's never going to strike you,
but
you're the one that it hits.
But to that point, and oddly enough, the shooting took place at a STEM school, which is a science, technology, engineering, math, which is something I'm very interested in. And I actually had a chance to judge at a robotics competition, state robotics competition. I guess it's probably been about a month ago. And I couldn't tell you how many groups showed up with some way to counteract or defeat a school shooting or an incident or anything else like that.
I was hoping you were going to say government surveillance.
No, and so, of course, you had other groups that were there. They had some type of robot or a mechanism that dealt with production, whether it be production of equipment or logging or whatever. So it was really neat.
Great kind of stuff because you learn the math, the science, and all while doing something you enjoy.
Yeah,
that's our future.
That maybe there's somebody I don't know about, but some of these schools ought to have a semi-professional astronomy lab. You can get $5,000 a nice telescope, computerized, and you learn trigonometry and all these other sciences. And you don't realize you're learning them. You've got to learn it to figure out positions of planets and all of this and take photographs.
Well, I think
it makes it fun.
The sponsors for these students in these schools, I guess maybe that was a hot button issue for them. But when I asked the question, just like you did, well, statistics shows this is not necessarily an issue as far as child safety. They just kind of looked at you and with a blank look, the teachers or the sponsor.
It's called the herd mentality. Anytime 99% of the people agree on something, it's probably wrong.
Yeah. No.
And I can give you 20 instances.
And so with a robot, the robot was to lock the door. And, so you programmed a robot to go lock the door.
Yeah.
Otherwise, which most of the schools now, they have automatic locking doors, which is just a solenoid within the door itself.
Yeah. Of course, they also could learn the trigonometry, the math, et cetera, by shooting trap because, you have to lead a little,
velocities
and angles and all that, which I've always been interested in because most of the time, if you're shooting at, let's say, 50 feet, and you're using birdshot that travels, let's say, at 1,250 feet per second, it's going to be there, and you don't have to lead much. That's more. That happens more in skeet, but people get all into that where they're shooting so far ahead of it. And when you think about how fast the shot flies, it's almost instantaneous.
Judge, speaking of science, talk about synthetic drugs that are being manufactured in China and sold here, shipped and sold here in the United States.
Just reading
very, very,
about
very
Chinese
cheap
knockoffs of Trigicons and all the gun stuff. They'll do anything, apparently.
Well, I think one of the things is with this, the two main drugs, there's lots of different synthetic drugs that's being made in China, but the most prevalent, and I say the most prevalent that, and some of it is just new on the scene that you're going to hear a lot more about, and that is fentanyl.
And for a long time, the reason fentanyl was abused, and frankly by a lot of doctors, is there wasn't a drug test for fentanyl until about 5 years ago.
And people are using fentanyl in place of opioids or heroin.
Yeah, and the scary thing about that, number one, is from China, so fentanyl might be rat poison and whatever. But fentanyl is for someone who's been on opioids, morphine, whatever, for months, maybe years, so they've built a tolerance up to it, and not for somebody,
and that's what makes it so dangerous, because you have the casual drug user that might be doing opioids on the weekend at a party or whatever, and they'll get a fentanyl, which is 30 to 50 times stronger, and they die right there on the spot.
It's just like the Chinese, steal copyrighted movies. They're producing them in China before you get to your theater. They don't follow any of the international rules or law of conduct. And this is another example of that.
Yeah, well, the fentanyl itself is killing thousands of Americans via overdose. It is an extremely powerful drug. We don't hear about it so much here, but you definitely hear about it on the border states. And oddly enough, we talked about this in the past, Judge, several of those states that border Mexico, where it's really flooding in at via China, is California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. But Texas, Judge, is the only state that's really publishing these numbers. So that's the only numbers that I have is what Texas had published.
It's like the liberals want to outlaw guns or raise the age limit to buy guns, but lower the voting age to 16 and make all drugs legal. We'll be back right after this break with more of Armed Alabama.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
How you boys put those guns down?
Say what?
Well, we're not just going to let you walk out of here.
Who's we, sucker?
Smith and Wesson and me.
Harry, huh? By the way, if you want Lucile, the baseball bat covered, and you can go back later and watch it on Facebook, with the rusted barbed wire, I'm pretty sure they have them on sale down at McCoy's Outdoor, one of our main sponsors, and you can get this or more traditional self-defense items.
If they don't have that, that's the only weapon they don't have.
Yeah, exactly. And they have clothes. They have everything for an outdoors kind of person, and they're on Spring 11, just west of I-65 overpass. And by the way, if your neighbor comes over and hits you with one of these, you've been injured, you've been battered, so go see Steve Moore. He's a personal injury lawyer. He's downtown on 8 North Dearborn Street, and you can call him at 445-7602. Adam, I'll throw out another question because we got one more of Paul's books to give away. Which era immediately followed the American Civil War? The Renaissance, Reconstruction, the Gilded Age, or the Reformation? Which era immediately followed the American Civil War? The Renaissance, Reconstruction, the Gilded Age, or the Reformation? So if you know the answer to that question, give us a call at 343-0106, and you'll win a copy of Paul Brewski's book, The Last Siege, The Mobile Campaign, Alabama 1865, which was end of April, 1st of May, winding up. And people seem to think when Lee surrendered at Appomattox, that was the end of the war. As Mrs. Lee said, just because the general has surrendered doesn't mean the war's over. So,
while we're waiting on a phone call, Judge, just before we went to the break, we were talking about the synthetic drugs that are made from China, of course, and shipped in via Mexico or wherever. We talked about fentanyl is a really bad
safe
one.
Housekeeping seal there.
Fentanyl is very deadly, and the other one that's really starting to take hold is flaca, which is more down in South Florida.
What is that?
It's a synthetic drug that's manufactured in China.
It's like a narcotic?
It is, and what it is, it causes hallucinations. It causes body temperatures to rise. So one of the first things the first things that the users do, especially if they're taking high quantities, is they take their clothes off, and you see them streaking through the streets.
And
at
19, that might have sounded fun. People doing that. Most people are pretty ugly with their clothes off. Thomas, hang on, and let's see. Thomas.
Oh, wait a minute. Which line is
he is on number 1, I'm showing. Yeah. Hey, Thomas.
Hello, I'm Thomas.
I'm Theodore.
Yes, I'm Theodore. Thomas, how are you doing, guys? I listen every week.
Pretty great. Do you want to answer our question, or you want to just chat?
Yeah, well, I'm glad I got another chance, because the first question I was going to say the Lusitania, but now I'm going to say Reconstruction.
Reconstruction's right. It's a little tricky because Gilded Age is kind of morphs into it, but yeah, Reconstruction, you're right. And don't hang up after we're finished talking. We'll put Phil on the line. He'll get your name and address.
That was the age of the carpetbagger, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Boy, that was interesting. History, the carpetbaggers in Kansas and all those folks, the James brothers and the Youngers and the Clantons and all those folks.
After the war, there was just a whole John Wesley Hard and Jesse James. You had all these people that were, pretty much Confederate veterans that didn't have anything to do. The South was wrecked.
And they had no home to go back to.
I remember in Abilene, there was a guy called Bear River Thomas. And he decided, he was the first guy to say, I'm going to run as sheriff's marshal in town without any guns. Well, they shot him in the back, and then Wild Bill Hillcock came to Abilene, and he got shot in the back.
Yeah.
So I guess we need guns.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a pacifist as my sheriff.
No, I sure wouldn't either.
Liable to happen. But, from everything I read, they say, we've got this kind of chivalrous view of the West where, James R. Ness squares off against somebody and they both draw. And most of the time, one of them was shooting the other in the back with a shotgun or hiding in a window.
Yeah, well, the thing is, our Ness and the riflemen, those guys are stone cold killers.
Oh, yeah.
They were going to kill the guy because it was their show.
Oh, yeah.
So why watch the darn thing? Who's going to end up in Boot Hill?
Well, some of us don't like to be surprised.
No, they don't, Judge.
Yeah. But let me hand you off to Phil, and he'll get your address on. We'll get this in mail to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for calling.
Going back to your previous question, the of the ironclads, the Monitor, one of the main advantages it had over other ironclads, especially in the Confederacy, is it actually had a movable turret.
Oh, wow.
The gun was actually on a movable turret.
They were so low, and they say they were so hot inside because they were burning, coal. And
it looked like they were so heavy they shouldn't have been able to float.
Yeah. It was kind of a fine line, because most of them were,
well, they set very
inches,
low.
if not a foot or two.
Yeah, they set very low in the water. Just for that reason, to be a low silhouette. Of course, they were angled to have the cannonballs bounce off of them, and of course, torpedoes were used.
Yeah.
To sink them, to take them out.
We had one that blew up in Mobile Bay and took down the Tecumseh. Is that the ship it took down?
I can't remember exactly which one.
Most of them failed, but one
did
work. But if you want to read something exciting, read about Admiral Franklin Buchanan. who was, one of the top naval leaders in the Confederacy, and he just a real character. He said the U.S. Navy went to Hades after they stopped allowing people, sailors, to be flogged. He said it was just downhill after that.
Which is a practice that the British Navy did quite regularly, yeah.
Well, I won't quote what Churchill said when he became Lord of the Admiralty. He said, I didn't know much about the Navy other than flogging, rum, and sodomy. So, Churchill's one of those people that, once again, is universally loved, but there are a lot of reasons he shouldn't be loved. And,
well, he certainly wasn't politically correct.
And by the way, you know that he was that Napoleon, who was supposedly a short man, was a half-inch taller than Winston Churchill.
Really?
Yeah, that shows you the propaganda that you you think of Churchill as large, obviously.
Yeah, larger than life.
Yeah, but he went to war or led England into war over Polish neutrality, Polish independence, and then after the war was over, Poland was captive of the USSR for the next 50 years. They completely forgot about Poland. So
I'll give you a little bit of trivia. I can't remember who we were talking about.
We were talking about the admirals, talking about the Monitor.
The Monitor, the torpedoes. Lord have mercy.
Damn the torpedoes.
Yeah.
But he really said, damn the mosquitoes, full speed ahead.
Well, torpedoes then were not like the torpedoes now.
Yeah, they were mines.
They were basically mines,
yeah.
Or either that, they were on really long stalks or posts or whatever, which torpedoes now are actually projectiles.
Right.
Or basically like underwater missiles.
Right. But, it's pretty clever, and of course, it's amazing any blew up. I know they would bring them in periodically and dry them out and all, but, and of course the blockade that Lincoln proclaimed against the South right after Fort Sumter was illegal under international law. And by the way, if you're interested in legal arguments regarding secession that aren't made by me, they're made by a Pennsylvania Quaker in 1825 who was an abolitionist. Go to the Mobile Area Civil War Roundtable Facebook page, and you can download about a 15-page paper that William Rawle, who was U.S. Attorney for Pennsylvania, that George Washington appointed. He wrote a book in 1825 about a view of the Constitution of the United States. It's an entire chapter that explains why secession is proper if a state wants to, the mechanism it should go through, and all of that. So it's kind of whose ox is getting gored at the current time. Because, I'd love if California wants to secede, I'd probably send them a donation. But bye-bye, And a couple of other states, too, as a matter of fact. Massachusetts would be another good nominee.
You was talking about Winston Churchill earlier, that he actually had his brother is actually descendant of some strangers in
half
Britain.
American, yeah.
And his brother's middle name was actually Strange.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you ever go to Britain, go near Oxford, and this Marlborough, Duke of Marlborough Palace, his ancestral home, it is bigger than about 10 square blocks in the city. It's one of the unbelievable. It's always open for tours, and it is really a fantastic kind of the height of the British Empire. He was actually born there, I think, but spent a lot of time there. He wasn't the oldest, so he didn't get the royal title and all.
So, Judge, we were talking about the synthetic drugs. Being manufactured in China and also manufactured in Mexico, but mostly in China, and brought into the United States from Mexico or through ports for being shipped. And that is fentanyl is really, really bad on the southern border. Of course, you'll hear in the media that, illegal immigration and porous borders are not an issue.
And I notice we have a measles outbreak.
Yeah.
You think that the immigration had anything to do with that?
Well, one of the things is Trump stated that he was going to shut down the border, if Mexico didn't do their part. But guess what Mexico is doing? They are now detaining the migrant convoys as they're coming up from Honduras and everything. So
probably scrubbing them up and then escorting them across the border later.
From the article that I read, which really didn't get a lot of traction, you didn't really hear a lot of it in mainstream about how Mexico is stepping up their efforts to detain these migrants convoys.
We got to go to a break, folks. We'll be right back to the last section of Armed Alabama after these breaks.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle. You forgot to say please.
You know, I think Lucile might give the Terminator, I guess if he has that shell of whatever it was, titanium underneath the rusted barbed wire, probably wouldn't do any good.
Might just bounce off it.
Adam, I noticed Remington is soliciting customer ideas for gun designs. Like if you've always thought they ought to make a certain kind of gun, you can, if you want to go to thetruthaboutguns.com, it's on the first or second, third page. It's been the last couple of days, and get the link. There's so many guns out there, I guess I don't have any desire to submit anything, but there are plenty enough for me. But that's kind of interesting.
I got one. It got 2 magazines, Fees magazine from each side.
There you go. Well, that's just verboten even talk about
for a
magazine.
High capacity at that.
It's amazing to me how many fairly expensive guns will come with maybe one magazine. They'll come with let's say, instead of having a nice rubber grip, some kind of hard, cheap plastic grip on it, and then a horrible trigger that, when they buy in bulk, they could, for $50, upgrade and have a nice trigger. But you spend $900 on a pistol, it's got a sorry trigger. And I think that ticks off a lot of people, especially if they're just getting into it. But, penny wise, pound foolish.
Judge, want to bring up the Biloxi police officer that was shot.
Very sad.
It is a very sad situation, and our hearts and prayers goes out to the family of Robert McKeithen. He was less than a year from retiring.
24-year veteran.
Yeah.
I've always kind of read those stories, like maybe an officer has never had to unholster his sidearm and then, was killed the last week before he retired.
And it was in the parking lot of the police department.
Yes. Yeah. And right now there's no motive. They really have no motive for the reason why that he was shot. They do have a person of interest that was arrested or taken into custody, and is so they think that he may be the killer, and is Darian Tawan Atkinson.
Yeah, well, they'll try him. He might be sentenced to death, and then he might be executed in 50 years, and long after we're dead.
Oh, I've got another, speaking of in the news, another little statement here from Cory Booker says that if he elected as president, you heard about that?
Yep.
Elected as president, he would use an executive order to ban guns and jail anyone who doesn't comply.
Well, why don't we have an executive order, let's say, banning people from writing books or making movies while we're at it? That shows, he knows he can't do that. I hope.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's unconstitutional on its face.
Sure. But, like I kind of discussed in that paper I was talking about at the Mobile Civil War Roundtable site, the Constitution is whatever the judges say it is, and that's very dangerous. But that's their position. If we say it, that's the way it is.
We won't have to worry about Mr. Booker.
I don't think so at all. We won't have to worry about him or Mayor Pete or Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden may be hospitalized for senility before the election.
I don't know. He's taking a big lead over
Bernie
Sanders.
The man who took his honeymoon in Moscow. At least he kind of doesn't hide his beliefs.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't hide his socialism.
Yeah. I mean, of all places to go, even if you were a commie, the commies in Russia then were going, if they could get out, going to Hawaii or some good place, they wouldn't go to Siberia.
That's a term you don't hear a lot of. I remember being
commie
younger, and it was nothing for somebody to call somebody.
I kind of let my true side out.
You were a fan of John McCarthy.
Chatcoms and commies.
I remember T-shirts and stuff like that that said "Kill a commie for your mommy."
There you go.
I mean,
better dead than red.
You're darn right. And I contend the reason they tore down the Iron Curtain is because they finally figured out they'd won. We're all socialists. Why keep it up? Think about it.
I do hope that the utterance of Nikita Khrushchev. Talking about we don't have to go to war with America. No, you're gonna die from within like a rotted fruit.
Well, that's happening.
It is,
and I think it probably tends to happen to all, large nations, countries, Rome, England. They kind of reach a point, and then they
go down.
Yeah, first of all, we spent all our treasure abroad. At least the Romans brought home the gold and the exotic animals and paraded them through Rome. We build schools for people when we invade their countries, and that can't last very long before you bankrupt yourself. But it seems to be the natural cycle of these things. A republic becomes an empire, and you become more despotic at home and warlike abroad. And what do we got? Troops in 165 different countries? I didn't even know there were that many countries. Of course, some of them I'm not so sure would qualify on traditional grounds, but
as a country,
probably some of them having the U.S. Army invade is the best thing that could happen to them.
Well, with deficits rising every day, there's something that's really
thanks to Alexander Hamilton. He started that tradition. He thought that was wonderful, and all these people that go to see his plays. The real hero is Albert Gallatin, the second Secretary of the Treasury, the longest serving, who started a program to balance the budget, stop the deficits, etc. His statue's in front of the Treasury building. Hamilton's
Wait a minute,
on the side.
They haven't torn it down?
Well, not yet. And by the way, one they have never torn down, talking about herd mentality, is Chief Justice John Marshall. He's the man that saved America. He was also owned more slaves than Thomas Jefferson and was a slave trader. But since he was for the expansion of the power of the federal government, he gets a pass, apparently.
Was Earl Warren a fan of his?
They would be of
compatible
traveling companions, yeah, and throw in Hugo Black too, and the whole bunch of them. They just got to meddle, But the states, we elect people to the legislature, and the first thing you do is start plotting how they can get to Washington. The state's legislature should be used as our defense to check the power of the federal government. That's what it was supposed to do. But nobody wants to do that. They just want to join the party.
Well, if you challenge the federal government, they cut off your funds.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny
which
how
is our funds.
I know their funds are our tax dollars. So,
to build bridges.
When Jefferson was elected, he abolished all internal taxes that had existed, and people who were convicted under the Alien and Sedition Act, he pardoned them all, returned their fines they paid with interest. That's why they called it the Revolution of 1800. That's not likely to ever happen again.
Of course, our favorite president now, Teflon Don, has the highest approval rating he has a higher approval rating than Barack Obama at the same time, and Ronald Reagan.
It would have been
a
boring 3 years for me had he not won. I've just enjoyed the whole show.
Absolutely,
it's been worth it.
I mean, what will we talk about?
I don't know that he at least he's not Hillary Clinton, and he's been enjoyable. Just stirring up trouble.
Of course, if you're trying to get the real news on the cable channels, you're just about out of luck.
Well, if it wasn't for Donald Trump, Twitter would already went under. You would.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I mean,
CNN wouldn't.
Twitter
have
would
anything
be
to talk
gone
about.
by now.
Twitter drives me. I can't say anything in 60 characters. It makes me 60 pages to say something.
Well, you could probably do this whole show in about 2.5 minutes. Then.
Yeah, it's just that's kind of a byproduct of being a lawyer. You're not even though you wrote briefs, you weren't brief.
Yeah,
and it was something.
All right, we're coming up on the end of the show. Be sure and check us out on our Facebook page, Armed Alabama Radio, FM Talk 106.5. Be sure to like, save, and follow while you're there, and tune in next week for more Armed Alabama.